Are you ready to learn the power of pivot tables? Pivot tables are the real key functionality in Excel, allowing you to move from endless and hard-to-read databases to concise and powerful views of your data, letting you extract the so what you're looking for. In this video, I'll teach you the basics of pivot tables. By the end of the video, you'll be able to create a pivot table and manage the fields and areas of the table itself to tailor it to your needs and extract the insights that you're looking for. There would be plenty of additional tips and tricks on how to work with pivot tables, but this video will be enough to let you start using pivot tables successfully. Let's move to Excel. This is the database we want to analyze with a pivot table. We have one single sheet in our workbook with a list of securities, two columns with the category and the country associated with each security, a value in $1,000, and a label classifying the securities based on the value, from very high down to low. And let's suppose that we want to know the total value for each of the categories here: tech, communication, consumer, financial, and so on. We could also do that with the SUMIF function, but as you will see, pivot tables are much more flexible and they will allow you to change the output of your analysis in a click of the mouse. Okay, first things first. How do we create a pivot table? To do that, you need to first select the data you want to be included. In our case, the whole database, so we can select it all with the shortcut Ctrl-A. Next, we navigate to the ribbon Insert Pivot Table. Excel will keep the data selection here, so no need to do it again. And here below, we need to select if we want the table to be in a new worksheet as selected by default or in an existing worksheet. I usually like to have dedicated sheets for my pivot tables, so I normally keep the selection as it is. Basically, we do not need to touch anything in this pop-up. We just have to press Enter. Congratulations, you created a pivot table. Let's name the sheet Pivot. So we double click here, right pivot, enter, OK. The pivot table fields section here on the right contains the list of all the columns in our database that we imported in the table: security, category, country, current value, and label. It's now time to populate the table. You can do so by dragging any of the fields. In our case, we want category in the area we prefer. In our case, we want to place it into the rows area. We do the same with current value, and we're done. Let's format the numbers a little bit. Okay, and we have how much the value for each of the categories in our securities sheet is. Now that we have seen how to manage the fields of a pivot table, let me tell you how to update your pivot table in case you need to change the source database. All we have to do is right-click on any of the values, select Summarize Values By, and instead of Sum, we select Count. Done. In a click of the mouse, you've just changed the data displayed. As another example, we can create our own two-dimensional table by crossing the category information with the country information. By dragging the country field into the columns area, we now see how many securities we have by category and by country. As you can see, most of the companies are headquartered in the USA. Finally, let's say that we're interested in performing this analysis only for the securities labeled medium, high, and very high, excluding the low ones. To apply this rule, to the pivot table, we drag the label field into the filters area. Then we click here, and I don't know why, but by default, Excel lets you pick just one value to be used as a filter. So we first need to select multiple items down here and remove low. Okay, now we click on OK and we're done. We have now just 25 securities. Note that the pivot table fields here on the right disappear if we click out of the table, and they reappear again once we select any cell of the table. If you now want to remove fields from your pivot table, you can either drag them out from the area like this, or simply deselect them from the fields here. Finally, let me tell you how to update your pivot table in case you need to change the source database. You have two cases. Case number one, you need to change some cells in the range selected. Let's say that we want to change the label column header into class. Let's go there, and by the way, I am moving across the sheet with Control and page up and page down shortcut. Let's select label, and let's call it class. To update your table, you need to right click anywhere in the table and select refresh. And as you can see, now we have class instead of label. Case number two, you need to change the data range you selected as source of your pivot table. Let's say that you now add one column after class. Let's go back to securities. Let's call it new, and let's say that every row has a 1. We don't really care about the content of this column. Control Enter. In the cell, double click, we fill the whole column with 1s, just to be quick. Okay, to include this new column into the table, we need to go back to our pivot table, go to Pivot Table, Analyze, and select Change Data Source. And now you either reselect the whole range, or you manually change it here in the selection from E to F. And be careful to move around with the mouse and not with the keyboard while you change these entries. Press Enter, and now, as you can see, we have the new column selected. You can follow the same process if you want to remove a column or a row. The last piece of information I want to share with you in this video is how to copy and paste a pivot table. If you want to copy your pivot table and create a second pivot table, you have to make sure you select all the cells of the pivot table itself. In our case, we need to select all these cells. And now if we press Ctrl C and Ctrl V down here, as you can see, we pasted a new pivot table, which we can change independently from the first one. On the other hand, if we select just a portion of the cells of a pivot table, for example these ones, and we press Ctrl C and Ctrl V down here, as we can see, we pasted regular cells. We kept the formatting, but not the functionalities of the pivot table. By the way, if your pivot table has filters up here, and let's add class as a filter here on top, you need to make sure you select these cells as well if you want to paste a working pivot table. And now you know how to create, customize, and edit pivot tables. As said at the beginning of the video, there are plenty of additional things you could do with pivot tables, but this is already a solid base to effectively work with them. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to stay up to date with the newest releases. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.